I asked your favorite creators,
what is your favorite Hearthstone deck ever?
In this video, we'll go through answers from Trump, Firebat, and 4 others that I'll reveal as we go. Up first is Savid's.
Favorite Hearthstone deck ever? Probably the Weasel Tunneler thingy. That was epic. That was a good time. Weasel Tunnelers.
For each creator, we'll hear their answer and then take a look back in time at their favorite deck. This isn't the clearest answer, to me at least. With that said, when I search for him playing Weasel Tunneler, there's several videos on his channel of him playing Awaken the Maker's Quest Priest, where he builds the deck unconventionally, focusing around Weasel Tunneler, Carnivorous Cube, and Twilight's Call. If that's not the Weasel Tunneler thing, as he so eloquently put it, then I don't know what is. The goal of the deck was strategically, and for laughs, to troll your opponent by giving them a deck full of Weasel Tunnelers. In the early game, you hope to play cheap Death Rattle minions to unlock the quest reward Amara for massive healing potential, being able to set your hero to 40 life. You also had powerful anti-aggro options in Duskbreaker, an AoE on a stick, and Potion of Madness. As a result, in some games, that would be enough to get you a win on their own, and the Weasel Tunneler action wouldn't be seen. But against slower decks, the Weasel Tunnelers could drastically slow them down by diluting their draws, or downright disrupt them altogether in the case of Big Priest. This deck was, in some respects, both a combo deck and a control deck. The combo, rather than an OTK, was the glory of seeing your opponent have a board full of little tunnelers. But when it came to eventually winning, you'd also chip them down using Shadow Reaper Anduin's hero power, or a big board that you stumbled into somehow along the way. It's always great to see certain cards find new uses in unconventional builds like this. Take Potion of Madness, for example. Instead of using it to take a minion from their board and trade it into another of their minions for an effective anti-aggro application, you could in this deck also target a Weasel Tunneler that they had drawn and then played, and then you can trade it off on your side of the board to put it back in their deck. Funnily enough, even the Weasel Tunnelers could be used for you, as playing them, once you have Shadow Reaper Anduin online, now comes with the option to refresh your 2 damage hero power. That is if you manage to maintain enough draws so you're not also having your draws diluted, but we can conveniently pretend that's not the case, because we're Team Weasel Tunneler here, alright? On that line of proper Weasel Tunneler propaganda, there was technically also a tiny application where it would help you to have them come back to you in your deck, because you may die to fatigue otherwise. We can pretend that fatigue existed as a Hearthstone mechanic past 2 years, right? Right? This deck definitely looks like a lot of fun. It's got a powerful dragon package and a powerful Death Rattle package that supports, I suppose optimally, a different Death Rattle minion, but can certainly give your Weasel Tunneler shenanigans a lot of gas. Throw in a Zoth at the top end for good measure, and the variance in your games was probably quite high. Super unique pick for a favorite deck of all time. Up next, the highly requested Mayor of Value Town has been called upon to provide his answer. Pause the video now and place a guess. You'll probably be right.
What's my favorite Hearthstone deck ever? It's probably Control Warrior, way back. Yeah, I enjoyed the playing of specific resources in very specific times. Such as, oh man, this is the right time to play my Cairn, or my Ragnaros. But yeah, really specific resources. Gotta maximize my value of Ragnaros. I can't just slam it down whenever. I gotta play it and take the chance that I kill the opponent's thing. Blah 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 blah. We used to do that back in the day.
I don't know what you guessed, but you're probably not surprised. Control Warrior back in the day isn't just the style of Hearthstone that Trump prefers to play, or the style he wishes he could replay, but it's the entire style he branded himself around. The very idea of playing specific resources at specific times dates back to this deck. And this deck in the metas it was featured in featured lots of games where making those decisions was so incredibly rewarding. Punishing on the flip side, sure, but that's the type of stuff that players like Trump crave. They want their decisions to matter, and it's no surprise that Trump wants his value, specifically when and how he uses it, to matter also. Now it's time, I suppose, to get into the strategy. And, well, explaining the strategy of Control Warrior is essentially explaining what control in Hearthstone is. But I suppose we'll do it quickly anyway, so we can dive into the specific cards that it used for those who don't know. The goal of OG Control Warrior was to remove minions in the early game, aka control the board. To do so, you relied on powerful removal. such as Shield Slam, which dealt damage to a minion equal to your armor, so it can be an incredibly efficient 1-mana spell to clear just about anything, or Execute, which would finish off any damaged minion, which I suppose would also make it a 1-mana spell that could kill just about anything. In Trump's specific list, you also had cheap minions like Cruel Taskmaster, Ironbeak Owl, and Unstable Ghoul that had effects that impact the board. The real star, though, was neither the removal or these minions, but rather, stealthily perhaps the best card in the deck, Fiery War Axe, a 3-attack weapon for 2 mana. The reason this weapon was so good is because of how important the 2 to 3 health breakpoint on minions is. A lot of minions, especially the powerful 2 to 3 mana ones, had 3 life. This meant Fiery War Axe was able to kill 2 of them for the cost of 1 card and only 2 mana. But also, it went 2 for 1 in a way that allowed you to immediately deal with specific minions that would otherwise become big problems. Say, an Undertaker or a Mana Worm. So in the early game, simply put, you're using your minions, your weapons, and your removal to try to keep the opponent's side of the board empty. And naturally, given the back and forth during a game of Hearthstone, you are bound to take some damage as you fend off the opponent's aggression. For this, the deck had armor gaining tools in Shield Block, which at the time was a 3-mana spell that gave you 5 armor and drew a card, as well as Armor Smith, a cheap minion that allows you to gain armor when your minions take damage. And for restoring life, perhaps the most flashy of the options, Alexstrasza, which offered a big life swing that could heal you up from as low as 1 to 15 if you chose to use her defensively. These options are of course in addition to Warrior's Hero Power, that exchanges 2 mana for 2 armor, an option that you could press every turn desired. The very reason that control is fun in Hearthstone is the reason that someone would enjoy playing this deck. It also came at a time in Hearthstone history where you could play a lot of powerful and cool legendaries at the top end of your deck. In contrast to this, for a lot of Hearthstone's history, a deck with this many expensive minions would be considered slow and or greedy, and you'd likely die in a lot of your games with a clunky hand as a result. So on top of the fun of control, you also get super long value games sometimes where you need to use each expensive legendary as if it were a chess piece in your puzzle to victory. A value deck fitting for the mayor of Value Town. That brings us to WoW Hobbs. WoW Hobbs' first videos date back to 2007. These videos have hundreds of thousands to even millions of views. As you may guess by the name and time frame, they featured World of Warcraft. This changed in 2013 when he posted his first Hearthstone video, taking a look at the Druid class during not the beta, but the alpha. As a Hearthstone creator, WoW Hobbs would go on to be someone who relies entirely on decks he created himself. Hobbs is, in my eyes, the creator who most embraces throwing together a pile of cards with no regard for anything other than the fun he hopes to have. We're talking throwing Warwalker Cho in every deck level of shenanigans. This isn't actually true like 100% of course, but the fact that he'll still do it regularly in modern WoW today certainly illustrates the type of decks he makes and plays. Greedy, slow, bad, weak. Whether any of these words actually apply to his decks never mattered to Hobbs, because he just sees the possibility for a good time. Because he does his own thing off the beaten path, I couldn't even begin to fathom a guess for what his answer is about to be. He might list words I've never heard of before. Let's brace ourselves for what this answer is about to be.
What's my favorite deck of all time? The first one that comes to mind was I really enjoyed Priest. I played a lot of Priest back in the day. It was my Hide Behind the Walls, which had like a double inner fire. A little bit of fire. Yeah, it was fun, but I've had so many great decks over the years that we've crafted here. Yeah, like it's unbelievable, buds. That's the first one, but I mean, that's just because it's an old school, one of the first ones, but it's honestly paled in comparison to the amount of amazing games we've had here over the years. Thank you, Jordan.
Hide Behind the Walls Priest. Not to be confused with Wall Priest. Yes, Hide Behind the Walls Priest, the Hobbs homebrew, is a deck from 2013 during Hearthstone's alpha testing phase, whereas Wall Priest was a deck from 2019. I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard this, I started writing about the Wall Priest deck in 2019 that featured Mosh Og Enforcer, an 8-mana 2-attack 14 health minion. This Wall Priest was actually good enough for a period of time to gather complaints from players as they expressed their frustration in dealing with this 14 health taunt that, if not dealt with, could become a 28 attack, 28 health minion, which would almost certainly result in a loss. but when he said it was one of the first decks he made, the alarm bells went off in my head, and I'm glad they did, because that would have been super embarrassing. Believe it or not, the age-old tale of YouTube of leaving in mistakes to bait engagement is utter nonsense that only harms the video and as a result the viewers and creator. I'd have been mortified if I posted this video with that as his pick. With that said, what exactly is Hide Behind the Walls Priest? The goal of the deck was to, in Hobbes's words, be aggressive, but not until you've gotten your defenses sorted. In translation, that more or less meant controlling the board early, or hang on as long as you can through the use of Priest's removal and healing, such as Shadow Word Pain or Holy Nova. Additionally, the namesake of the deck, you hope to hide behind big walls in the form of taunt minions. Funnily enough, the only taunt minion the deck even ran was Mogushan Warden. Most of the walls the priest was hiding behind were Courteous of Defender of Argus, and copies created by using faceless manipulators. A purely defensive option was to play the overstated minion Ancient Watcher and give it taunt with Defender of Argus. Or perhaps a Lightwell, which also has 5 health for only 2 mana, and if buffed big enough would be hard to kill without it immediately healing itself back up. In either case, the ultimate goal was to eventually Divine Spirit whatever large health taunt minion you had to double its health. I find his original description of the deck quite fun, because this deck, not an aggro deck by any means, but being defensive and then offensive is super fitting for what is essentially the world's first inner fire deck. You'd be defensive by staying alive and sticking a large butted minion, and then you'd turn aggressive with Divine Spirit to double health, and then play Inner Fire to pump the attack to match the health. While watching him play this deck, you could tell that this was early Hearthstone. Looking through the lens of today, it is so clear that Divine Spiriting something and then Inner Firing it was way more powerful than anything else he could possibly be doing. But he didn't know that. He routinely made plays other than making huge minions when he could, oftentimes resulting in missing lethal entirely, or dying. But calling out misplays in 2013 Hearthstone in 2026 is absurdly unfair. Plus, in the case of games with massive Lightwells, for example, why kill opponent when you can play with your food? It's easy to see misplays 13 years later. This is the time in Hearthstone where you'd have a big turn. You feel like you're popping off, but in actuality you just played 3 cards and got so dizzy that you forgot Shadow Word Pain can't be used on a 4-attack minion. Hide Behind the Walls Priest, the Hobbes homebrew that started it all. Incredible. Up next is Dan, or Danehearth if we go by his account's names. He is a Hearthstone creator who's had success playing both Wild and Standard, with his oldest videos dating back over 11 years ago. He sits somewhere between WoW Hobbes, someone who makes all their own decks, and someone who primarily plays meta decks. Over the years, he has built an incredibly loyal audience by homebrewing decks, and doing so very well, by not shying away from building with powerful mana cheat or combo cards. He embraces strong cards and strong synergies between them, much like meta decks would, but changes the main goal of the decks to be different than the decks everyone else plays. And his favorite deck is the perfect example of this.
What's
Hey,
your
Jordan.
favorite Hearthstone deck ever?
I would have to say Mind Render and Auctioneer Priest. When Stormwind was released and everyone was playing quests, yeah, you could let your opponent complete the quest and then you would take their reward off them permanently.
The goal of Dane's combo deck was simple. In the early game, you do your best to fend off your opponent, whilst setting up to allow yourself to cheat lots of mana with Nazmani Bloodweaver, a 3 mana, 2 attack, 5 health minion that reads, after you cast a spell, reduce the cost of a random card in your hand by 1. What it meant to quote-unquote set up to allow yourself to play Nazmani depended on the game. One of the best options was palm reading, to give the spells in your hand an initial discount before dropping the Nazmani. You could also corrupt and then play an Insight, which would allow you to draw and discount a Nazmani, a Lucia, or Auctioneer by 2. Once you got Nazmani in play, you were able to make more spells cheap or free to continue the cycle of cheating mana. If you were able to cheat enough mana, either with lots of 0 mana spells, by having Nazmani stick around for more than 1 turn, or ideally by making additional copies of Nazmani, then any excess discounts that can't be applied to spells that now cost 0 were sure to reduce a Lucia and Auctioneer. And reducing those 2 cards was critical. For those who don't know, at this time, Mindrender Elucia was a 3 mana, 1 attack, 3 health minion that read, swapped hands and decks with your opponent until your next turn. When Mindrender Lucia was released, it was a 2-mana card, nerfed to a 3-mana card, which is when this video of him playing it was captured, but when you're trying to cheat 1,000 mana, that doesn't really matter, and we'll see that later. And if you don't know, Gadgets and Auctioneer, when in play, draws you a card anytime you play a spell. With these at 0 mana, or as close to it as you could get, you could then use your turn's mana to play cards from your opponent's hand. And if any of those are spells, also draw cards from their deck. And if your Nazmanes are still there, when you play their spells, you're also reducing the cost of more of their cards so you can play even more of them. Whether you were stealing a questline reward, combo piece, or burn spells, the goal was to prevent the enemy from having a win condition. But funnily enough, the goal was also to gain a win condition for yourself, as this deck doesn't do anything other than this. It doesn't reduce into some sort of OTK combo. Why, you may ask? Because the only thing more fun than winning a game, at least to Dane, was stealing your opponent's hand and deck and using their win condition against them. If not playing a win condition on your own and only being able to win if you steal one sounds wonderfully risky and game dependent, then this type of deck is for you. Very few cards in Hearthstone allow as much mana cheat as Nazmani Bloodweaver, and Lucia is the best disruption card the game has ever seen. So it's no surprise that if you manage to survive the early game and get enough discounts flowing like a proper river, then the options for theft-based shenanigans were fully unlocked. If you're watching this and are like, wow, I want to try this, unfortunately you can't, as Lucia has been properly neutered as deserved. So this will have to conclude Dane's pick for his favorite deck. Doug. For those who don't know who Doug is, he is a YouTuber and streamer who solves problems that no one has. He gained his fame through streaming various silly gaming challenges, such as GTA 5, but if I say cop, then the cops try to kill me.
I would still like a copy of the code even if I tricked you. I can do that.
I'm calling your cops.
Apparently if you say, sorry for tricking you, I just become an idiot.
And by explaining games with food, such as the history of Mario games, but explained with burritos.
Miyamoto had invented the burrito.
In general, he's a funny guy who people like to watch play games and do silly things within them. With that said, trying to explain everything about who Doug is and what he does to someone who has no idea is basically impossible. So I'll leave it at that. I've been watching him for years, so it's super cool to be able to include him in this video. Speaking of including him, if you're wondering what on earth he's doing in this video, it may come as a surprise to hear that Doug is a former Hearthstone caster and producer who not only worked on Hearthstone esports back in the day, but also posted YouTube videos about Hearthstone to his channel, which at the time was named Glaudus. He started out working on the Hearthstone Championship Tour, where he helped design the Hearthstone Trinity series. From there, he went on to work for Reynad at Tempo Storm, and in 2018 applied to Hearthstone's So You Think You Can Cast, and would have his application retweeted by Bren Brode himself. On top of that, he had an entire PC Gamer article written about how not hiring him would be a huge misplay. Given his past with Hearthstone, I decided to shoot my shot with his stream TTS, and it worked. Let's see what his favorite deck ever is.
What is your favorite Hearthstone deck ever?
What is it? Tempo Mage. That was the one I got to Legend with.
Tempo Mage! The Tempo Mage in question is from over 10 years ago. Its early game strategy was to tempo out strong minions with the hope to use your board for chip damage. Key early game minions such as Manoworm, Mad Scientist, Sorcerer's Apprentice, and Flamewaker shined. Manoworm, a 1-mana 1-attack 3-health minion, was a key 1-mana play that the mage hoped to have on curve, stick on board, and then combine with cheap spells so it could grow its attack to burst down the opponent. Mad Scientist, a 2-mana 2-attack 2-health minion, is a card that has excelled in a plethora of Hearthstone decks over the years by having a fine statted minion that cheats out a secret into play for free when it dies. The cheated out secret perhaps countered a spell, and counterspell kept you alive, something like an ice barrier, or in the case of Tempo Mage, got more board tempo from the secret mirror entity. Sorcerer's Apprentice was at the time a 2-mana 3-attack 2-health minion that made your spells cost 1 less while it was in play. Back in Tempo Mage's time, she was more tame than she would eventually become as the years of cards and synergies in Wild stacked up. But even here, she provided a nicely statted minion that would let you weave in powerful spells, or just more spells, that could improve your curve, grow your Manoworm's attack, or synergize with the 4th minion I mentioned, Flamewaker. Flamewaker excelled because of its effect, which was dealing damage randomly when spells were played. But in this deck, you are happy to just play it, as you would any other minion on its own, and hope it stayed alive on your next turn, rather than greedily holding it to combine with more cards. The name of the deck is Tempo Mage after all. Beyond these key cards in the early game, it also packed some incredibly powerful minions and spells in the deck for the mid game, with excellent options like Paladin Shredder, one of the strongest and most iconic death metal minions from early Hearthstone, and Fireball, a notorious card for living up to Hearthstone's motto of being deceptively simple and insanely fun. 4 mana, 6 damage, that's it. Yet it was such a staple, even at times a powerhouse that players wondered if it was too good. Seriously, like there were complaints about Fireball. For the late game, it included Dr. Boom. Well, like every deck at the time, I suppose. 7 mana, 7 attack, 7 health that came with 2 free 1 attack, 1 health boombots that when died, dealt 1 to 4 damage to a random enemy. That could put the final nail in the coffin by being too much for the opponent to come back from, especially given all that you've thrown at them before this. If Dr. Boom, the early game and mid game minions, and powerful burn spells like Fireball and Frostbolt didn't finish the opponent off, another option you had in the late game was Archmage Antonidas. Archmage Antonidas' effect adds a fireball to your hand when a spell is played, while it's on the board. Even just one more fireball could be the difference, and much like with Dr. Boom, when you play him, your opponent could already be on their heels and then be unable to kill the Antonidas while also having to heal and develop something meaningful on their own, which in either case would probably result in their demise. This deck is quite interesting because it's not the deck I think of when I think of a lot of these cards, but it certainly used them all so well. Like for Sork and Antonidas, for example, this isn't the deck where you'd get 4 spell cost reduction into play at the same time for infinite 0 mana fireballs provided by Antonidas. And for Sork and Flamewaker, this isn't the Alterac Valley and later years Wild deck where these 2 minions combined with a stockpile of spells would essentially just be a machine gun that would enable extremely powerful boast OTKs very early in the game. This was just a humble little tempo deck, but don't let these comparisons fool you. This deck packed a serious punch and was a solid deck in its own right. Since my previous video where I asked OG Hearthstone creators about their favorite decks, Hearthstone's first world champion and OG creator Firebat returned to the internet. Here's what he said was his favorite deck ever.
My favorite Hearthstone deck of all time? I don't know.
Could you imagine if it just ended there?
I like different metas, not really different decks. I like Legacy meta, I like Next Ramus meta, I like Patron Warrior meta, I like the OTK, I like the Priest meta, I like Handlock.
Not the clearest answer for the sake of this video, but I do totally get where he's coming from. Because Handlock was the only deck or class name he mentioned without saying the word meta afterward, let's go with that one. Handlock was a Warlock deck that revolved around using the Warlock hero power, Life Tap, to fill your hand up with cards. From there, on top of just having access to more resources, you could use large hand size to your advantage through the use of cards like Mountain Giant, which is an 8 attack 8 health giant that is cheaper for every card in your hand, as well as Twilight Drake, which is a 4 mana minion that gains health for each card in your hand. Using your hero power, nicknamed tapping by the community, and then dropping these 2 minions as soon as possible was the dream curve for Handlocks. At least in the matchups you could do so without dying. From there, you were primarily a tempo-based control deck that hoped to use your big threats to kill your opponent whilst controlling the board with removal spells such as Hellfire or Shadow Flame. Besides just gaining card advantage when you use Life Tap, importantly you also lose life, which enabled the Warlock to eventually drop another giant, Molten Giant, which is the giant that gets cheaper the less health you have. This is one of the most exciting things about Handlock, balancing using health as a resource without dying. Knowing when to heal was essential, because doing so at the wrong time could lock Molten Giant out of being played, or you would just have to, instead of playing a more powerful minion, play a healing minion, which was less tempo and board pressure. But if you greeted out another life tap or held your healing too long, you could end up just losing the game. Speaking of healing, the best way to do so throughout the different eras of Handlock were Earthen Ring Farseer, 3 mana 3 healing, Antique Healbot, 5 mana 8 healing, Alex Straza as previously mentioned, or the coolest way in this deck, Lord Jaraxxus, which could not only heal you up to 15 health if you were below 15 health, but would also replace your hero power and give you a 3 attack, 8 durability weapon. The mix of being a control deck that sometimes ignored that entirely and won as the aggressor by tempering out big destroying minions and using them for a quick win was a wonderful blend that very few other control decks at the time offered. Traditional control decks almost exclusively sat back until they'd weathered a storm or two, before then limping across the finish line using whatever mid-range minions stuck around to hit face multiple turns in a row. For me, Handlock is also one of my favorite decks of all time. It's fun to have lots of cards to play, it's fun to drop big threats, it's fun to toy the line between enough life and not enough life, and I have many positive memories of this deck as well. There's more I could get into about Handlock, but this video has gone on long enough, so I will respect your time and call it there. Thanks for watching. If you liked that one, be sure to subscribe because I can certainly do it again. If you missed the last time I did this, it's on screen now. Bye-bye.